The scent of garlic and rosemary had long since stopped making Olivia Parker's stomach growl. After 10 months working at Bellissimo, the upscale Italian restaurant in the heart of downtown Chicago, the aromas that once made her mouth water now just clung to her uniform like a second skin. She scrubbed her hands raw every night, but the smell of expensive food she couldn't afford always lingered beneath her fingernails. It was a Tuesday evening in early March, quieter than usual. Her feet ached in the worn flats she'd resoled twice already. The hole in the left one was growing again, and she could feel the cold floor through the cardboard she'd stuffed inside that morning. Olivia was nobody here, just another face in a white shirt and black slacks, refilling water glasses and nodding politely while wealthy patrons complained about wine temperatures. Invisible, forgettable, exactly what she needed to be while she saved every penny for her mother's heart surgery. The medical bills were eating through their savings faster than she could earn them, and her 2 jobs, this one and the early morning shift at the bakery, barely kept them afloat. "Table 12 needs attention," Tony hissed as he passed her, his cologne too strong, probably trying to mask the cigarette smell he thought no one noticed. Olivia grabbed a fresh pitcher of water and turned toward the back corner booth, the one reserved for special guests, the one that had been empty all night until 20 minutes ago. That's when she first saw him. He sat with his back to the wall. She noticed that immediately, the way he'd positioned himself to watch both the entrance and the emergency exit. A man in a charcoal suit sat beside him, speaking in low tones into a phone. Another stood near the kitchen door, arms crossed, his jacket cut in a way that couldn't quite hide the bulk underneath. But it was him who commanded the space. Dark hair touched with silver at the temples, a jawline that could have been carved from marble, and eyes that seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it. He wasn't looking at her, wasn't looking at anyone, but Olivia felt the weight of his presence like a physical thing pressing against her chest. A small girl sat beside him in a booster seat, no more than 5 years old, with dark curls that bounced as she colored aggressively in a princess coloring book. She wore a velvet dress the color of midnight, far too formal for a child, and patent leather shoes that probably cost more than Olivia's monthly grocery budget. "Daddy, I want the star pasta," she announced in that imperious way only small children can manage. His entire face transformed when he looked at her. The hard edges softened, the dangerous aura dimmed just slightly, and something almost human flickered in those cold, dark eyes. "Stella pasta." "Little star," he corrected gently, touching her nose. "You have to practice your Italian, remember? But I like English better," she pouted. And Olivia watched this powerful man who had 3 armed guards in a public restaurant melt like butter in the sun. Before this story goes any further, if you can feel that tension hanging thick in the air of the restaurant that night, take just a moment to hit the subscribe button and turn on those notifications so you never miss another story as deeply moving as this one. A simple like and share from you will help Olivia's story find its way into even more hearts out there. And tell me, where are you listening from tonight? Drop a comment down below so we know just how far the journey of this struggling young waitress has traveled across the world. Now, let us return together and see what unfolds when Olivia makes her way toward table 12. Olivia drew in a long, steadying breath and made her way toward table 12, the water pitcher in her hand feeling heavier than usual. Or perhaps it was just the weight she felt pressing down on her as she drew closer to that man. She kept her gaze lowered, her smile professional and distant, a mask she had practiced hundreds of times before. "May I pour some water for you, sir?" The man in the charcoal gray vest looked up with a sharp, cold gaze, his hand instinctively drifting toward his coat in a motion so subtle most would have missed it. The bodyguard standing near the kitchen door straightened his posture as well, but Dante Moretti only glanced at her with the fleeting attention one might spare for a piece of furniture. "Fine." His voice was deep, carrying the unmistakable tone of someone raised among expensive classrooms and inherited power. Olivia poured the water with careful precision, acutely aware of the tension radiating from his security team like heat from a furnace. The little girl looked up at her with large, round brown eyes, and Olivia could not help but let a genuine smile bloom across her lips. Children were the same everywhere, innocent and blissfully unaware of the weight of money and power that separated their world from hers. "What a beautiful dress you have," Olivia said softly. The little girl's face lit up like Christmas morning. "Daddy bought it for me. I have shoes that match too." She swung her little feet to show them off, nearly knocking over her box of crayons in the process. "Bella," her father said quietly, though there was no real scolding in his voice. He reached out to rearrange the scattered crayons, and Olivia noticed the scars across his knuckles, old and faded now, but unmistakable. These were not the hands of a man who had spent his life holding wine glasses in fine restaurants. "I am sorry," Bella whispered, then returned to her coloring with renewed focus. Olivia finished pouring and stepped back, already forgotten. That was simply how things worked. People like him did not see people like her. Not really. She was just part of the scenery, one of the countless gears that kept the world of the wealthy running smoothly, while she herself struggled to keep her own world from falling apart. She returned to the service area, but her eyes kept drifting back to that secluded corner. She watched Tony bow deeply when he approached table 12, addressing the man as Mr. Moretti in a voice so obsequious that Olivia had to look away. Moretti. The name sounded vaguely familiar, as though she had read it somewhere in the papers, but she could not quite place it. Perhaps he was some powerful businessman, one of those figures in Chicago's elite circles where she would never belong. She served table 7, poured more wine for a couple celebrating something special, cleared dishes from table 3, smiled at a family with 2 children fighting over dessert, but a part of her mind remained anchored at table 12. She watched the man order lobster risotto for himself and mac and cheese for the little girl. She watched the way he cut the pasta into small, child-sized pieces, with the precision of someone who had done this 1,000 times before. The way he wiped the sauce from his daughter's chin with a napkin, the way he tilted his head to listen as she told him things Olivia could not hear from this distance. There was something heartbreakingly lonely about watching them, a father and daughter inside their fortress of security, surrounded by people yet completely isolated. He never smiled. Not really. The tenderness in his eyes when he looked at his daughter was always intertwined with constant vigilance, his gaze sweeping toward everyone who entered the restaurant, toward every unexpected sound. What had made him this way? What kind of life required 3 armed bodyguards for a simple dinner with his daughter? Olivia wondered. But then she shook her head. It was none of her business. She had enough problems of her own without being curious about the lives of the wealthy. Her mother was waiting for surgery. The bills were piling up, and her shoes were growing thinner by the day. She turned away and continued her work, not knowing that in just a few minutes, her life would change forever. The evening continued to flow in its familiar rhythm. Olivia cleared table 9, brought appetizers to table 5, took an order from a middle-aged couple who had just walked in. But no matter how hard she tried to focus on her work, her eyes kept returning to that secluded corner of the restaurant, as if pulled by an invisible thread. The food had been served. She watched Dante Moretti pick up his knife and fork, cutting each piece of mac and cheese into small, child-friendly portions with almost mechanical precision. Those scarred hands moved with surprising gentleness, as though this were a sacred ritual he performed every single day. Bella said something, pointing at her coloring book, and he tilted his head to listen with absolute attention. No phone in his hand, no glances toward his bodyguards. In that moment, the powerful man who made his entire security team tense was simply a father listening to his daughter talk about the princess in her picture. Bella paused to eat, and cheese sauce smeared across her chin. Before Olivia could even blink, Dante had already reached for a napkin and gently wiped the mess from his child's face. No frown, no sigh, just a gesture as natural as breathing, as though he had done this 1,000 times and would continue doing it 1,000 more without a single complaint. Something caught in Olivia's chest as she witnessed that scene. She thought of all the fathers she had served in this restaurant. Wealthy men glued to their phones while their children desperately tried to get their attention. Fathers who pushed childcare duties onto wives or nannies and returned to their business conversations. Dante Moretti was not like them. He was completely present, every second of every minute, as though the curly-haired little girl was his entire universe. But it was that very presence that made Olivia notice something even sadder. She looked around table 12, at the empty chairs, at the bodyguard standing watch like a statue, at the way Dante continuously scanned the entrance even while talking to his daughter. This was not a normal dinner. This was a mobile fortress erected in the middle of a restaurant, and the father and daughter were living inside its invisible walls. Loneliness. The word appeared in Olivia's mind as clearly as the neon lights outside on the street. They were wealthy enough to buy this entire restaurant if they wanted, but they were lonely in a way that money could never heal. A 5-year-old girl in an expensive velvet dress, with no mother, no siblings, no friends her own age, only her father and grown men in black suits standing guard. A man so powerful that even the restaurant manager bowed before him, yet he had no one to share dinner with except his little daughter. Olivia wondered what story lay behind them. Where was Bella's mother? Why did a simple meal require 3 bodyguards? Where did those scars on Dante's hands come from? But then she shook her head, pushing away thoughts that did not belong to her. The restaurant felt strangely peaceful tonight. Soft jazz music drifted from the speakers, the laughter and chatter of diners creating a pleasant harmony, the aroma of fresh bread and basil filling the air. Everything was so perfect it felt artificial, like a painting rendered with too much care. Olivia did not know why, but she felt uneasy. A vague sensation as though the atmosphere was growing heavier, as though a storm was gathering somewhere just beyond her sight. She looked toward the entrance, where the streetlights cast their glow through the large glass windows, and wondered if she was just imagining things. Tonight was too quiet in a way that felt almost frightening. The front door of the restaurant swung open with that familiar chime, a sound Olivia had heard 1,000 times over the 10 months she had worked here. But this time, something made her freeze where she stood. 3 men walked in. They wore jeans, jackets, baseball caps pulled low to hide their faces. At first glance, nothing seemed unusual. Just 3 ordinary customers like any other. But Olivia had worked long enough to recognize when something was wrong. It was the way they moved. Not the way people walk when searching for an empty table or waiting for a host to greet them. They moved with purpose, with coordination, as though they had rehearsed this before. Their eyes swept across the restaurant quick as lightning, not to admire but to locate. And those bulges beneath their jackets, the kind of bulges Olivia had learned to ignore when serving powerful guests, no longer looked harmless. Before she could fully process what she was seeing, everything happened at once. At table 12, Dante Moretti shot to his feet. Olivia did not know how he sensed the danger so quickly, in just a fraction of a second, while she was still trying to understand why those 3 men made her uneasy. But he knew. His dark eyes were no longer the eyes of a gentle father cutting pasta for his daughter. They had turned cold as steel, sharp as a blade, and dangerous in a way that made Olivia realize she had vastly underestimated this man. He said something in Italian, his voice clipped and precise like a military command. The bodyguard in the charcoal gray suit rose immediately, his hand reaching inside his jacket. The one standing by the kitchen door had already moved, positioning himself between table 12 and the aisle. Then one of the 3 men drew his gun. "Everybody down," he screamed, his voice thundering through the restaurant like a clap of lightning. Nobody moves, nobody dies. The world shattered. Screams erupted from everywhere. A woman at table 5 shrieked in terror as her husband pulled her under the table. Dishes crashed and shattered as someone slammed into the food cart. Chairs toppled with heavy thuds. Diners dove to the floor, hands clutching their heads, bodies trembling. A child at table 3 wailed for their mother. Tony vanished somewhere, probably into the kitchen from the very first second. Other servers scattered in panic, trays clattering to the floor with piercing sounds, the smell of spilled food mixed with the scent of fear spreading through the air. Olivia stood rooted in the middle of the restaurant like a statue. Her legs refused to obey. Her mind went blank. All those active shooter trainings she had taken at community college, all those scenarios she never thought would become reality, were screaming in her ears. Run, hide, get down, but she could not do any of it. Then she heard it, Bella's scream, not the ordinary cry of a child. It was the scream of a little girl who had just watched her safe world collapse, the scream of the most primal terror imaginable, high-pitched, soul-tearing, and so desperate that Olivia felt as though someone had just squeezed her heart in their fist. She turned toward table 12. Dante had pulled Bella into his arms, one hand holding his daughter, the other gripping a gun that seemed to have appeared from nowhere. He was trying to shield the little girl with his own body while his 2 bodyguards had drawn their weapons, standing guard in front of them. But the 3 attackers had also taken position. One was pointing his gun at the crowd to maintain control. One was facing off against the 2 bodyguards. And one was circling around, moving along the wall, his eyes locked onto table 12, onto Bella. The first gunshot rang out, and Olivia did not know who fired first. Maybe it was a bodyguard, maybe it was an attacker. It did not matter, because in that moment, she could only see one thing. The 3rd man was advancing toward the curly-haired little girl crying in her father's arms, and he was raising his gun. Everything happened within seconds, but for Olivia, time seemed to stop. She stood there, among the shattered glass and the screaming crowd, watching the 3rd man advance step by step toward table 12. Dante's 2 bodyguards were pinned down by the other 2 attackers, gunfire exchanging back and forth, neither able to turn and help. Dante was still holding Bella tight, trying to pull his daughter toward the back door, but the gunmen moving along the wall had already blocked their only escape. He did not care about Dante. His eyes were fixed on the curly-haired little girl sobbing uncontrollably, and in those eyes was something that made the blood in Olivia's veins turn to ice. Hatred, not the cold cruelty of a hired killer, but real hatred, old and deep. He wanted this child dead. not just because of his mission, but because he wanted it. Olivia saw his finger tighten around the trigger. She saw the black muzzle pointing straight at Bella. She saw Dante trying to twist his body to shield his daughter, but the shooter's angle had been calculated. He was aiming for the gap between Dante's shoulders, where Bella's curly black hair was exposed. There was no one in between. No bodyguard, no table or chair, nothing at all. Just empty space between the gun barrel and the 5-year-old child in her midnight velvet dress. And Olivia, she did not think. If she had thought, she would have run. If she had thought, she would have dropped to the floor like everyone else, covering her head, praying for this nightmare to end. If she had thought, she would have remembered her mother waiting for surgery, the money she had saved for 2 years, the small life she was fighting to hold together day by day. But she did not think. Her body acted before her mind could intervene. She lunged forward. Her worn shoes with the hole on the left side pounded against the marble floor. She flew through the space between the tables, arms reaching out, eyes seeing only one thing, the crying little girl. She crashed into table 12 just as the gunshot rang out. Her hands grabbed Bella, pulling the child from Dante's arms, pushing her under the table, and covering her with her own body like a shield made of flesh and bone. She felt the soft curly hair of the child beneath her chin, felt the small trembling body in her arms. Safe. Bella was safe. Then the pain came. Not immediately. First there was the sound, a strange wet noise, as though someone had just punched a piece of raw meat. Then came the heat, spreading from her left shoulder as if someone had pressed a red-hot iron bar against her skin. And finally, the pain. Dear God, the pain. It tore through her shoulder like a wild beast, biting, crushing, burning. Olivia heard someone scream, and it took a second before she realized it was her own voice. Blood. She felt it before she saw it, warm and wet, spreading across her white shirt, soaking through the fabric, dripping onto Bella's hair. The little girl was looking up at her with those brown eyes wide with horror, lips trembling, unable to make any sound except choked sobs. It is okay, Olivia heard herself whisper, though she was not sure if she was speaking to Bella or to herself. You are okay. You are okay. Gunshots still rang out somewhere around them, but the sounds seemed distant, as though echoing from another world. Olivia's vision began to blur, darkness creeping in from the edges. She tried to keep her eyes open, tried to keep shielding the child beneath her, but her strength was leaving her bit by bit along with the blood flowing endlessly from her wound. Then someone lifted her up, strong hands, decisive, yet strangely careful. She heard Dante's voice, deep and strained, right beside her ear. He was shouting something in Italian, then switching to English. Look at me. Look into my eyes. Do not close your eyes. She tried to focus, looking into his dark eyes. They were no longer cold. In them was something she could not name. A fire burning fiercely. Perhaps anger, perhaps fear, perhaps something else entirely. The little girl. She tried to speak, her lips dry and heavy. Bella, is she okay? Safe. His voice came out hoarse. You saved her. You. He did not finish the sentence. Or perhaps he did, but Olivia could no longer hear. The last image she saw before the darkness swallowed everything was the face of Dante Moretti, the stranger whose daughter she had just sacrificed her life to save, looking at her as though she had done something he could not begin to understand. Then the world went black. The darkness was not entirely black. It had faint streaks of light, sounds drifting from far away like waves crashing against a rocky shore. Olivia floated within it, not knowing where she was, not knowing who she was, only feeling the strange peace that came with no longer having to fight. Then the pain pulled her back. A strong pressure bore down on her left shoulder, where the fire still smoldered, and she groaned without meaning to. Her eyes fluttered open, lids heavy as lead, and the world appeared blurry before her. Dante Moretti was kneeling beside her. Gone was the cold, powerful demeanor of the man she had seen at table 12. His face was tense, jaw clenched tight, and his dark eyes were looking at her with something close to panic. His hand pressed firmly against her shoulder, blood seeping through the gaps between his fingers, dark red and throbbing. Stay awake. His voice was no longer that deep, commanding tone. It had grown hoarse, urgent, almost pleading. Look at me. You have to stay conscious. Olivia tried to open her mouth, but only a ragged wheeze escaped. She wanted to ask about Bella, wanted to know if the little girl was safe, but her lips refused to obey. As though reading her thoughts, Dante spoke quickly. Bella is fine. Marcus is taking her to the car. You saved her. He swallowed hard, his voice trembling slightly. You saved my daughter." Some part of Olivia wanted to laugh. She, the waitress with the worn-out shoes, had just taken a bullet for the daughter of a man whose name she had not even known until tonight. It was insane. It was absurd. But she could not laugh. She could only blink, struggling to keep her vision from fading. "Do not close your eyes," Dante repeated, his voice sharper now. "Call Dr. Cole immediately. Now." The last word he shouted toward someone Olivia could not see. Then she felt herself being lifted. Strong hands slid beneath her back and knees, raising her from the cold floor of the restaurant. The pain flared violently as her shoulder moved, and she clenched her teeth to keep from screaming. He was carrying her. Dante Moretti, the stranger with 3 armed bodyguards, was holding her in his arms as though she were something precious that needed protecting. The cold night air of Chicago hit her face as they stepped outside. Police sirens wailed somewhere in the distance, but Dante did not move toward them. He walked quickly toward a black SUV with its engine running, the rear door already open, and a man Olivia recognized as the bodyguard in the charcoal gray suit sitting behind the wheel. She was placed inside the vehicle, her head resting on Dante's lap. He slid into the back seat, one hand still pressing firmly against her shoulder, and the SUV sped off before the door had fully closed. "Drive faster," Dante commanded, his voice cold as steel. "Dr. Cole is waiting at the house." "The house? Not the hospital?" Olivia wanted to ask, but everything was spinning too fast. The streetlights of Chicago streaked past the windows, smears of orange light blurring like a watercolor painting. She felt every jolt of the car as it weaved through intersections, heard the blaring horns outside, but all the sounds were distant, as though wrapped in cotton. "Talk to me," Dante's voice came from above her. "What is your name?" She had already told him. Or had she? She could not remember. "Olivia," she whispered. "Olivia Parker. Olivia." He repeated her name as though carving it into his memory. "All right, Olivia Parker. You are not allowed to sleep. Do you hear me? Look at me." She tried to focus on his face. In the flickering light from the street lamps, she could make out his sharp features, a small cut on his forehead she had not noticed before, and eyes that had not left her for a single second. "What do you do, besides waiting tables?" A strange question in a situation like this. But Olivia understood. He was trying to keep her awake. "I sell pastries," she murmured. "In the mornings, a bakery on Oak Street. 2 jobs." Not a question, a statement. "Because of your mother?" How did he know about her mother? She had never said anything. "Heart surgery," she said, not understanding why she was sharing this with a stranger. Perhaps because she was bleeding on his lap. Perhaps because she was not sure she would live to see tomorrow. $80,000. "I have saved 12,000. You will not need to worry about that anymore," Dante said, his voice strange. "Do you hear me? You will not have to worry about money anymore." Olivia wanted to say she did not need his pity, but her eyelids were growing heavy beyond her control. The darkness was pulling her back, warmer and more inviting than ever before. "Do not sleep." Dante's voice grew distant, urgent, and anxious. "Olivia, do not sleep. We are almost there. Stay with me, stay with me." But she could not. This time, the darkness swallowed her completely, and the world disappeared. Light was the first thing Olivia became aware of. Not the harsh glare of hospital fluorescent lights she had grown familiar with from taking her mother to appointments. This was soft, warm light, filtered through thick velvet curtains and radiating from a crystal chandelier hanging from a ceiling that seemed impossibly high. She blinked several times, trying to process what she was seeing. The ceiling was decorated with intricate gold detailing, classic European architecture she had only ever seen in movies. She was lying on an enormous bed, the kind she did not know the name for but was certainly 3 times the size of the single bed in her cramped apartment. The sheets were cool and impossibly soft, real silk rather than the imitation fabric she always bought from discount stores. She tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. Pain from her left shoulder erupted as though someone had just plunged a hot knife into it, making her groan and fall back against the pillows. "Take it slow." A deep male voice came from beside her. "You should not move too much." Olivia turned her head and saw a middle-aged man sitting in a chair next to the bed. He wore a white shirt with sleeves rolled up, gold-rimmed glasses, and was looking at her with the professional demeanor of someone accustomed to handling situations like this. "I am Dr. Cole," he said, standing and moving closer. "You underwent surgery to remove the bullet approximately 12 hours ago. The bullet passed through the soft tissue of your left shoulder, fortunately missing the bone and major arteries. You will need a few weeks to fully recover, but there is no permanent damage. The bullet, the restaurant, Bella. Memories crashed over her like a wave, leaving Olivia gasping for breath. She remembered everything. The gunshots, the chaos, the curly-haired little girl crying, and the moment she had lunged forward without a single thought. "The little girl," she whispered, her voice rough and dry. "The child. Is she okay?" "Isabella is completely unharmed," Dr. Cole answered, but he was not the one who spoke next. "Thanks to you." Olivia turned toward the doorway. Dante Moretti was standing at the threshold, shoulder leaning against the oak frame, his dark eyes never leaving her. He was still wearing the shirt from the night before, but now she could clearly see the dried bloodstains on the white fabric. Her blood splattered across his chest and arms like a terrifying abstract painting. He looked exhausted. Dark circles under his eyes, stubble on his jaw, hair no longer as neat as it had been in the restaurant, but his eyes were still as sharp as before, watching her with an emotion she could not decipher. "Dr. Cole, give us a moment." Not a request. It was a command, spoken in the voice of a man accustomed to being obeyed. The doctor nodded and left, closing the door behind him. The room suddenly felt smaller with just the two of them. Dante approached the bed, each footstep silent on the thick carpet. He stopped a few paces away, close enough for her to see the faded scars on his knuckles, far enough not to invade her space. "You took a bullet for my daughter," he said, his voice deep and measured as though weighing every word. "A complete stranger. You did not know who we were. You owed us nothing, and yet you did it." Olivia did not know how to respond. She wondered if he was praising her or trying to understand, because truthfully, she did not understand it herself. "I did not think," she whispered. "I just acted." "That is exactly what I cannot comprehend," Dante said, something flickering in his eyes. "People do not sacrifice themselves for strangers. Not in my world." His world? She wondered what kind of world that was, where a simple dinner ended in gunfire and bloodshed. But she did not ask. Not now. "Where am I?" she asked instead. "My home," Dante answered. "You will stay here until you have fully recovered." "I cannot." She tried to sit up again, and again the pain pushed her down. "I have jobs. I have my mother waiting. I cannot stay here. Your employment has been arranged. The restaurant manager has been informed that you were in an accident and need time to recover. The bakery as well." Dante spoke in a tone that allowed no argument. "As for your mother, she has been contacted and told that you are traveling for work with a VIP client and will return in a few weeks. All of her medical expenses have been covered, including the upcoming heart surgery." Olivia froze. "You have no right. You saved my daughter's life." Dante cut in, his voice dropping low, almost a whisper but heavy as stone. "I have every right, and I will not accept a refusal." They looked at each other in silence. Olivia wanted to be angry, wanted to protest, wanted to tell him she did not need the pity of wealthy people. But she looked down at the silk sheets, looked at her left shoulder carefully bandaged, and thought of the $80,000 for her mother's surgery that she had been desperately scraping together for 2 years. She was not in a position to refuse. Not now. "All right," she whispered, bitterness on her tongue. "Until I recover." Dante nodded, and for the first time since entering the room, some of the tension in his face eased. "Rest now," he said, turning toward the door. "Whatever you need, just tell the staff. You are my guest, Olivia Parker, and I always treat my guests well." 2 days passed in a state between waking and sleeping. Olivia slept more than she was awake, her body demanding rest to heal the wound, and she did not have the strength to resist. Dr. Cole came to check on her twice a day, changing bandages, administering pain medication, and nodding with satisfaction at her progress. But by the 3rd day, when the pain had subsided and her mind began to clear, Olivia truly realized where she was. A gentle knock on the door pulled her from her fitful sleep. A woman stepped in, plump in figure, silver hair pinned neatly at the nape of her neck, and warm brown eyes like a grandmother from a fairy tale. She wore a simple but immaculate gray uniform and carried a silver tray with a fragrant breakfast. "Good morning, Miss Parker. I am Elena, the housekeeper of this estate." Her voice was soft with a hint of an Italian accent. "I have brought your breakfast, oatmeal with honey and fresh fruit, as Dr. Cole instructed." Olivia tried to sit up, and this time the pain was manageable enough for her to do it on her own. "Mrs." Elena placed the tray on the small table beside the bed, then walked to the tall wardrobe against the wall and opened its doors. "I have also prepared some clothing for you. Mr. Moretti said you would need things to change into during your stay here." Olivia looked into the wardrobe and could not believe her eyes. Clothes hung neatly on wooden hangers, from silk nightgowns to jeans and cashmere sweaters, from undergarments to shoes. All of them were designer brands she had only ever seen through the windows of stores she never dared enter. And all of them were exactly her size. She did not finish the sentence. Mr. Moretti has people who take care of such things. Mrs. Elena replied with a gentle smile, as though preparing an entire wardrobe for a stranger in just a few days was the most normal thing in the world. If you need anything else, just press the call button beside your bed. I will come right away. She gave a small bow and left, leaving Olivia alone with her breakfast and a dozen questions swirling in her head. She ate slowly, the smooth porridge with its gentle sweetness melting on her tongue, perhaps the best meal she had eaten in years. But the luxury surrounding her kept her from fully enjoying it. Something felt wrong. After finishing her meal, Olivia decided to explore. She stood up, her legs slightly shaky but steady enough to walk. The room was larger than her entire apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. A king-sized bed with an intricately carved headboard, a mahogany vanity with a gold-framed mirror, a velvet armchair positioned beside a window overlooking a lush green garden. But there was no television. Olivia looked around again to make sure. Not a single screen anywhere in the room. She walked to the nightstand and opened the drawer. Empty. No phone. Her own phone, that old smartphone with the cracked screen, had vanished somewhere since that night at the restaurant. She went to the bedroom door and grasped the handle. The door was not locked. That was good. She opened it and stepped into the hallway, a long corridor with high ceilings, lamps hanging along both walls, and red carpet stretching its entire length. She had not taken 5 steps before a figure appeared at the end of the hall. Marcus, the bodyguard in the charcoal gray suit she had seen at the restaurant, the one who had driven her here. He approached, his face expressionless as though carved from stone. Miss Parker. His voice was deep and even. You should not be walking around too much. Dr. Cole advised that you need rest. I just wanted to take a little walk, Olivia said, trying to keep her voice calm. Look around. I will escort you back to your room. Not a suggestion, a statement. Marcus stood there like a wall, not blocking her path in an obvious way, but his presence was enough for her to understand she had no other choice. Olivia looked at him for a long moment, then turned and walked back to her room, hearing Marcus's footsteps following behind until she closed the door. She stood in the middle of the luxurious room, looking at the silk bed, looking at the wardrobe full of designer clothes, looking at the window frame overlooking the perfectly manicured garden, and one word appeared in her mind as clear as daylight. Cage. This was a cage, gilded in gold, lined with velvet, decorated with crystal and silk, but still a cage. Was she a guest or a prisoner? Olivia did not know the answer, and that frightened her more than the bullet that had passed through her shoulder. On the 4th day inside the golden cage, Olivia had learned to count time by the meals Mrs. Elena brought and the visits when Dr. Cole changed her bandages. She had tried to leave her room 2 more times, and both times Marcus had appeared like a ghost, polite but firm in escorting her back. She had finished reading 3 books from the shelf, all classic works in English and Italian that she suspected no one had touched in years. She had spent hours staring out the window, gazing at the garden with its fountain and angel statue in the center, wondering if her mother was worried, wondering if she believed the story about the VIP business trip. That afternoon, while Olivia sat in the armchair by the window, a knock came at the door. Unlike Mrs. Elena's firm knock or Dr. Cole's steady one, this sound was light and low, as though the person knocking had to stand on tiptoe to reach. She stood and opened the door. Bella stood in the hallway, her curly black hair tied in 2 small braids, wearing a pale pink floral dress that looked less formal than the velvet one from that night. Her large round brown eyes looked up at Olivia with a mixture of shyness and eagerness, and in her hands was a piece of colored paper folded in half. "Hello," Bella said softly, her voice clear as wind chimes. "Daddy said I should not bother you, but I wanted to give you this." The little girl held up the paper, and Olivia knelt down to be at eye level with her. She opened the card and felt something catch in her chest. It was a hand-drawn picture in crayons. 2 stick figures, one tall and one short, holding hands. The tall one wore white with a red spot on the shoulder, while the small one wore a blue dress. Around them were golden stars and pink hearts. Above them, in the wobbly handwriting of a 5-year-old, were the words, "Thank you for saving me." "I drew it myself," Bella said, her voice full of pride. "I made you a superhero. See, you have a red cape." Olivia looked more closely and realized the red spot was not the bloodstain she had thought. It was a cape. In this little girl's eyes, she was a superhero. "It is beautiful," she whispered, her voice trembling slightly. This is the most beautiful gift I have ever received. Bella's face lit up. Really? Can I come into your room and play? I promise I will be good. I will not make any noise. Olivia looked out into the hallway. No one was there. No Marcus, no Mrs. Elena. Perhaps this was the first time the little girl had slipped away without being watched. Come in, she said and stepped aside. Bella ran into the room with the excitement of a child exploring new territory. She climbed onto the bed, sat cross-legged in the middle of the silk sheets, and patted the empty space beside her. Olivia could not help but smile. She walked over and sat down next to the little girl, her back resting against the headboard. Does it hurt? Bella asked, her eyes on Olivia's bandaged shoulder. Daddy said you got hurt because you saved me. I am sorry. It is not your fault, Olivia said gently, and it does not hurt very much anymore. I am feeling much better now. Bella was quiet for a moment, her tiny fingers fidgeting with the hem of her dress. Then she looked up, her eyes holding a sadness that should not appear on the face of a 5-year-old child. Do you know where my mommy is? The question caught Olivia off guard. I do not know. Why do you ask? Mommy went to heaven, Bella said, her voice as casual as if she were talking about the weather. When I was really little, I do not remember her, but Daddy has pictures. She was beautiful. Daddy says I look like her. Olivia did not know what to say. She reached out her hand and Bella automatically leaned in, as though it were the most natural thing in the world. Daddy works a lot, the little girl continued, her voice growing quieter. He is always gone. There is Nanny Sophia who plays with me, but the nanny is not like Daddy. I wish Daddy would stay home more. Your daddy loves you very much, Olivia said, remembering the way Dante had looked at his daughter in the restaurant, the way he melted for this little girl. I am certain of that. I know, Bella sighed, a sigh too old for her age. But I do not have any friends. Daddy says it is not safe. I cannot go to school like other kids. I study at home with a teacher, but the teacher is not a friend. I only have Daddy and Marcus and Mrs. Elena and Nanny Sophia, but they are grown-ups. Grown-ups do not play princess with me. Olivia's heart tightened. She looked at the little girl in her arms, this 5-year-old child in her expensive dress and shiny shoes, yet so lonely she did not have a single friend her own age. Wrapped in silk and protection, yet completely isolated from the outside world. I will play princess with you, Olivia heard herself say. If you want. Bella's eyes went wide. Really? You are not joking? I am not joking, Olivia smiled. But right now I cannot run around because I am still hurting. Would you like me to read you a story instead? Bella nodded eagerly and ran to the bookshelf, pulling out a book she seemed to have brought from somewhere hidden under her dress. It was a princess story with a hardcover and glittering illustrations. She climbed back onto the bed, curled up beside Olivia like a kitten, and handed her the book. Olivia began to read. Her voice was deep and steady, telling of a princess lost in an enchanted forest, of the magical creatures she met along the way, of friendship and courage. Bella listened, occasionally asking innocent questions, sometimes giggling at the funny parts. Gradually, the questions grew fewer. The little girl's breathing slowed and became steady. Olivia looked down and saw that Bella had fallen asleep, her head resting on Olivia's uninjured arm, her curly black hair spread across the white sheets. In sleep, the little girl's face was so peaceful and innocent it made Olivia want to cry. This was a child surrounded by everything money could buy, yet starving for the simplest things money could not. Friendship, normalcy, a childhood not imprisoned inside a fortress of security. She sat still, not daring to move for fear of waking the little girl. And in that moment, the golden cage no longer felt suffocating, because inside that cage, there was a lonely little girl who needed her. Dante Moretti stood outside the slightly open door, his back against the wall, silent as a shadow. He had been standing there for nearly 10 minutes, ever since Marcus reported that Bella had snuck into the guest's room and refused to leave. He had intended to walk right in and bring his daughter back to her room, but then he heard Olivia's voice reading aloud, deep and warm and gentle, and his feet suddenly could not move. Now, through the narrow gap in the door, he watched them. Bella lay curled up beside Olivia, her head resting on the young woman's arm, her curly black hair spread across the white sheets. Olivia had also fallen asleep, her head tilted toward his daughter, one hand still resting on the open book, the other arm wrapped around Bella as though protecting the little girl even in slumber. The image made Dante's heart clench in a way he had forgotten long ago. 5 years. It had been 5 years since he last saw a scene like this. The memory struck without warning, sharp as a blade. Gianna lying in bed with a newborn Bella in her arms, her silky brown hair spread across the pillow, her smile weary but overflowing with happiness. She had looked up at him and said, "Look, Dante, look at our daughter. She is perfect." And she had been perfect. Both of them had been perfect, until his world took one of them away. Dante closed his eyes, pushing away the ghost of the past. Gianna was gone, and nothing could bring her back. He had accepted that long ago, transforming his pain into strength, turning his loss into the drive to protect the only thing she had left behind, Bella. He had sworn never to let anyone get close enough to his daughter to hurt her. He had built walls around his own heart and around hers, keeping them both safe inside a fortress that was lonely but impenetrable. And yet now, a waitress with worn-out shoes had shattered every barrier in an instant. She had thrown herself into the line of fire to save his daughter without hesitation, without knowing who he was, without knowing what she would gain. And now Bella was sleeping in her arms with a peace he had not seen on his daughter's face since Gianna died. Dante pushed the door open and stepped inside, trying to move as quietly as possible, but Olivia was already awake. Perhaps she had a sixth sense. Perhaps her body had learned to stay alert after surviving that horrific night. Her eyes opened in the darkness, looking straight at him, and in that moment, neither of them spoke. The room was bathed in pale light from the window, enough for Dante to see the young woman's face. Gone was the fear and confusion from those first days. There was no anger or resentment either, as he had expected. Only calm, and something else he could not name, but it made his chest tighten. He walked to the bed and bent down, gently sliding his hands beneath Bella. His daughter stirred in her sleep but did not wake, accustomed to being carried back to her room by her father whenever she fell asleep somewhere else. When Dante straightened up with Bella in his arms, he looked down at Olivia once more. She said nothing, only watched him with eyes he could not read. He wanted to say something, to thank her for making his daughter smile, for reading to Bella, for giving the little girl something he could not provide, no matter how wealthy he was. But the words would not come. Instead, he only nodded, a small gesture barely noticeable, then turned and walked out of the room with his daughter in his arms. That night, after tucking Bella into bed and kissing her forehead, Dante returned to his own room but could not sleep. He stood by the window, gazing out at the dark garden, the glass of whiskey in his hand untouched. The image of Olivia lying with Bella kept appearing in his mind, intertwined with memories of Gianna, and he did not know what to do with the emotions rising in his chest. For 5 years he had not allowed anyone past his walls. For 5 years he had lived like a machine, existing only for Bella and for the empire he had to protect. And yet a waitress with worn-out shoes was making him forget how to breathe. Dante did not know what that meant, and it was precisely that not knowing that frightened him more than any enemy ever had. The following week passed like a strange dream that Olivia was not sure she wanted to wake from. Bella came to visit her every day, sometimes sneaking in like that first time, sometimes being led by Mrs. Elena, with the resigned expression of someone who had given up trying to stop the little girl. The child brought books, brought dolls, brought an entire box of colored paper and scissors to teach Olivia how to fold origami. "You folded it wrong," Bella said sternly when Olivia tried to turn a piece of paper into a crane for the 5th time and failed for the 5th time. "You have to fold this corner first, then fold that corner. Like this." The little girl's tiny hands were far more skilled than Olivia's, creating cranes, flowers, and perfect little boats, while Olivia could only produce things that looked like crumpled paper. But Bella never laughed at her. The child just patiently guided her again, her brown eyes lighting up whenever Olivia finally managed to make something that resembled the model. Bella also taught Olivia Italian. "Buongiorno" means good morning, the little girl explained seriously. "And buonasera is good evening. Grazie means thank you. Now you say it." "Grazie, Bella. Grazie, Bella," Olivia repeated, and the little girl giggled at her mispronunciation. "Not grazie, it is grazie. You sound too American." Olivia could not help but laugh along. How long had it been since she laughed like this? Not the professional smile when serving customers, not the forced smile when trying to reassure her mother that everything would be fine, but a real laugh from deep in her chest, because a 5-year-old was criticizing her language skills. Her wound was healing. By the 8th day, Dr. Cole allowed her to walk around more, as long as she avoided strenuous activity. And that was when Olivia finally got to explore the mansion, with Marcus as her escort, of course. The house was larger than she had imagined. 2 main floors with countless rooms, from a living room with ceilings 10 meters high to a library steeped in the smell of old books. From a dining room that could seat 30 people to a modern kitchen where a private chef was preparing dishes Olivia did not know the names of. But the place she loved most was the garden. It stretched behind the mansion like a green oasis in the heart of Chicago. Rose bushes trimmed to perfection, rows of straight cypress trees, and at the center was a fountain with a white stone angel statue standing in the middle, wings spread wide, peaceful face gazing up at the sky. "This is my favorite spot," Bella said, pulling Olivia's hand toward the fountain. "Every time I throw a coin in here and make a wish, the wish comes true. Daddy said so." The little girl pulled a shiny coin from her dress pocket, gave one to Olivia and kept one for herself. "Make a wish, but do not say it out loud, or it will not come true." Olivia looked at the coin in her hand, looked at the little girl squeezing her eyes shut with intense concentration, and wondered what Bella was wishing for. A friend? For her mother to come back? Or simply to go outside and play like normal children? She closed her eyes, wished for something she did not say even to herself, and together they threw their coins into the fountain. The sound of the coins hitting the water rang out clear as bells. On the 10th day, Mrs. Elena brought her a phone. "Mr. Moretti says you may call your mother," she said. 15 minutes. Olivia took the phone with trembling hands. She knew the call would be monitored, knew that someone was probably listening to every word she said, but she did not care. She just wanted to hear her mother's voice. "Olivia?" Susan Parker's voice came through, familiar and warm enough to make Olivia want to cry. "Sweetheart, are you all right? They said you went on a VIP business trip. I was so worried." "I am fine, Mom," Olivia said, her voice catching. "I am sorry I did not call sooner. Work has been busy. Are you feeling okay? Are you taking all your medication?" "I am doing well, but listen, something strange happened." Her mother's voice was full of surprise. "The hospital called and said all my bills have been paid, even the deposit for the surgery. I do not understand who paid for it. Was it the company you are working with?" Olivia froze. $80,000. He had paid $80,000 as though it were pocket change. "Yes, Mom," she said, her voice distant. "It was probably them." After hanging up, Olivia sat still on the bed for a long time, staring at the phone in her hands. She did not know how to feel. Grateful? Of course. But there was something else too. A debt she did not know if she could ever repay. An invisible thread binding her to this house, to that man, growing tighter with each passing day. And the most frightening part was that she was no longer sure she wanted to escape. The invitation came on the afternoon of the 14th day, delivered by Mrs. Elena with her usual warm smile. "Mr. Moretti would like to invite you to dine with the family," she said. 7 o'clock, in the small dining room. The small dining room. Olivia almost laughed when she stepped into the room they called small. It was only small compared to the main dining room that could seat 30 people, but it was still larger than her entire apartment on the outskirts of Chicago. A long oak table with 8 velvet-upholstered chairs, a crystal chandelier hanging above, and large windows overlooking the garden bathed in the glow of sunset. Bella was already seated there, her feet swinging above the floor, her eyes lighting up when she saw Olivia. "Miss Livy!" the little girl exclaimed, the name Bella had given her since the 5th day. "Sit next to me. I already told Daddy. Daddy said it was okay." Olivia glanced toward the head of the table, where Dante was sitting. He had changed from his business suit into a black shirt with the collar unbuttoned, looking slightly less intimidating but still radiating that quiet power she had learned to recognize. He gave her a slight nod, a gesture inviting her to sit. Dinner was served by people Olivia had grown familiar with over the past 2 weeks. The appetizer was butternut squash soup with fresh cream. The main course was grilled salmon with asparagus. And Bella had her own portion of the macaroni and cheese she loved so much. For the first time since arriving here, Olivia sat at the same table as Dante, instead of eating alone in her room. Bella did most of the talking, telling them about the paper cranes she and Olivia had folded, about the Italian lesson she had taught, about how funny Miss Livy's pronunciation was. Dante listened to his daughter with the patience Olivia had seen from that first night at the restaurant, occasionally nodding or giving a small smile when Bella said something particularly enthusiastic. "Daddy, did you know Miss Livy wanted to be a doctor?" Bella suddenly announced, nearly making Olivia choke. "She told me, but she had to quit school because Grandma got sick." Dante looked over at Olivia, his dark eyes glinting with curiosity. "Is that so?" Olivia set down her fork, not knowing where to look. She was not accustomed to talking about herself, especially with someone like him, but Bella was watching her with encouraging eyes, and she found she could not refuse. "I completed 2 years of medical school," she said softly, "University of Illinois. But then my mother was diagnosed with heart disease, and I had to quit to work. The scholarship was not enough to cover medical expenses, and I could not study while earning enough money." She shrugged, trying to act as though it no longer mattered. "Life had other plans." "Life does not have plans," Dante said, his voice deep. "People are the ones with plans, and sometimes other people destroy those plans." Something in his voice made Olivia look up. He was no longer looking at her. He was staring into the glass of red wine in his hand, his eyes distant as though gazing into another time, another place. "Like Gianna," she said before she could stop herself. His late wife's name slipped through her lips as though it belonged there, and she immediately regretted it. "I am sorry. I did not mean to." "It is all right," Dante cut in. But there was no anger in his voice. He looked over at Bella, who was busy twirling pasta around her fork and paying no attention to the adults' conversation. "She told you about her mother." "A little," Olivia admitted. "That her mommy went to heaven." Silence stretched between them, broken only by the sound of Bella's fork touching her plate. Then Dante spoke, his voice so low that Olivia had to lean forward to hear. "They called it a car accident. Gianna's car lost control on the highway and crashed into the barrier. She died instantly." He paused, his fingers slowly turning the wine glass. "But it was not an accident. The brakes had been cut. Someone wanted her dead, and they succeeded." Olivia felt as though someone had just poured ice water down her spine. "Who?" "I am still looking." Dante looked up, and in his eyes was a fire Olivia had never seen before, cold and ruthless. "For 5 years I have been looking, and when I find them, they will wish they had never been born." She did not know what to say. There were no words sufficient for this moment. She just sat there, looking at the man across from her, and for the first time understood that his coldness was not something he was born with. It had been forged from loss, from betrayal, from a world that had taken the woman he loved and forced him to raise his daughter alone inside a fortress of security. "I understand," she said softly. "Not completely, but I understand enough." Dante looked at her for a long moment, as though weighing something. Then he nodded, a small gesture that carried more meaning than any words. Dinner continued in a lighter atmosphere. Bella talked about her dream of becoming an astronaut princess, making both Olivia and Dante suppress their laughter. But gradually, the little girl's eyes began to droop, her head nodding, until finally she fell asleep in her chair, still holding half an uneaten cookie. Dante stood without a word, walked around the table and bent down to lift his daughter. Bella curled instinctively into his chest, still not waking, and Olivia, not understanding why, also stood and followed them. No one had invited her, no one had told her to come, but her feet automatically followed Dante up the stairs, down the hallway, to Bella's room. She stood in the doorway watching him lay his daughter on the bed, pull up the blanket, and bend down to kiss the little girl's forehead. The gesture was so tender it made her heart ache. When Dante turned back, he found her standing there. They looked at each other in the darkness of the hallway, saying nothing, but something had changed between them. A wall had been lowered, a door had been opened, and Olivia did not know where it would lead. That night Olivia could not sleep. She lay on the silk bed, staring up at the towering ceiling, and thoughts swirled through her mind like a storm that refused to stop. The image of Dante carrying Bella to bed, the way he kissed his daughter's forehead, the look in his eyes when he turned and saw her in the dark hallway. The story about Gianna, about the car with severed brakes, about 6 years of hunting for an enemy, everything spiraled together, leaving her unable to find peace. The clock on the wall showed 1 in the morning when Olivia decided to get up. She wrapped herself in a cashmere sweater from the wardrobe and opened her door, half expecting Marcus to appear as he always did, but the hallway was empty. Perhaps even the guards needed sleep. She walked along the corridor, bare feet on the thick carpet, with no particular destination. She just needed to move, needed to escape the 4 walls that were suffocating her. Her footsteps led her to a large oak door she had seen during her explorations but had never entered. She pushed it open, and the smell of old books flooded her senses. The library, a spacious room with bookshelves reaching from floor to ceiling, thousands of volumes arranged neatly like silent soldiers. A wooden sliding ladder leaned against the shelves, allowing access to the highest levels. A fireplace at the far end of the room was burning, flames dancing on the walls, and before the fireplace were 2 leather armchairs. One of the chairs was already occupied. Dante looked up when he heard the door open. He was still wearing the black shirt from dinner, a glass of whiskey in his hand, and he looked as though he too had been sitting there for hours. The firelight cast shadows across his face, highlighting his sharp features and dark eyes that watched her without surprise. "Cannot sleep?" he asked, his voice deep in the quiet night. "No," Olivia admitted. "You either?" "I rarely can." Dante tilted his head toward the empty chair. Sit. Unless you want to go back to your room. She should go back. She knew that. But her feet carried her to the chair across from him, and she sat down, curling into the warmth of the fire. Silence stretched between them, but it was not an uncomfortable silence. It felt companionable, as though both of them understood that sometimes words were not necessary. Olivia let her eyes drift across the spines of books on the nearest shelf, and recognized a familiar name. You have Hemingway, she said. The Old Man and the Sea. You like Hemingway? I like the way he writes. Concise. Powerful. Not a single wasted word. Dante took a sip of whiskey. I prefer Fitzgerald, The Great Gatsby. The story of a man who built an empire just to reclaim what he had lost. He gazed into the flames, and in the end, realized that the past cannot be reclaimed. Where did you grow up? Olivia asked, not knowing why she wanted to know. New York. Brooklyn, Dante answered. Came to Chicago when I was 23. Gianna was from Chicago. She said if I wanted to marry her, I had to learn to endure the winters here. Something flickered across his eyes, almost like a smile. She hated New York. Said it was too loud, too greedy. Chicago has more soul, she used to say. She sounds like she was a wonderful person. She was the only one who saw me as a human being, Dante said, his voice dropping as though he were speaking to himself rather than to her. Not the Moretti name, not the family empire, not the danger or the power. She looked at me and only saw Dante. Just a man. He paused, turning the glass in his hand. When she died, I thought that part of me died with her. Olivia said nothing. She had no words sufficient for the pain she heard in his voice. She just sat there, listening, and somehow that seemed to be enough. Time passed in the flickering firelight. They talked about Chicago, about the street corners she had walked, and the restaurants he had known, about sleepless nights and books that kept company in the darkness, about nothing and everything all at once. Somewhere in the conversation, Olivia realized she was leaning forward, and so was Dante. The distance between them had narrowed without her noticing, and she could see every silver strand at his temples, every faded scar on his knuckles. He was looking at her too with an expression she could not decipher, but it made her heart beat faster. Then Dante abruptly stood up. It is late, he said, his voice returning to its cool detachment as though a wall had just been erected between them. You should rest. Before Olivia could say anything, he had set his whiskey glass on the table and walked out of the library, leaving her alone with the dying fire and 1,000 questions without answers. She sat there for a long time after he left, looking at the empty chair across from her, wondering what had just happened, what had almost happened, and why she felt so disappointed when he walked away. In the days following that night in the library, Dante seemed to avoid Olivia. No more dinners together, no more chance glances in the hallway. He disappeared into his mysterious work, only appearing when Bella needed him, and even then, he found ways not to stay in the same room with her for too long. Olivia told herself this was better, safer. She should not have any feelings for this man. Who was he? A mafia boss, a dangerous man, a world completely different from hers. But every night she lay awake, remembering their conversation by the fireplace, the way he spoke about Gianna, the look in his eyes when he watched her before abruptly walking away. The third week began with a rare, sunny morning in early spring Chicago. Bella pulled Olivia out to the garden, where the little girl wanted to throw more coins into the fountain and wish for lots more things. They walked along the stone path between rose bushes that had stopped blooming, hand in hand, and Bella chattered on about her dream last night, about the new doll Mrs. Elena had given her, about how she wanted to learn to swim but Daddy said not yet. Miss Livy, Bella suddenly said, her voice dropping as though she were about to reveal a state secret. I will tell you something, but you cannot tell anyone, okay? What is it? Olivia bent down, curious at the little girl's serious expression. Daddy talks about you, Bella whispered, her eyes sparkling mischievously. I heard Daddy talking to Uncle Marcus. Daddy asked if you were eating and sleeping well, if you needed anything. Daddy asks a lot. Olivia's heart skipped a beat, but she tried to keep her composure. Your daddy is just being polite. I am a guest after all. No. Bella shook her head so hard her 2 braids swung back and forth. Daddy looks at you different, like... The little girl furrowed her brow, searching for the right words. Like the way Daddy looks at Mommy's pictures, but different. I do not know how to explain it. Olivia did not know how to respond. She opened her mouth to say something, anything to change the subject, when her eyes accidentally drifted toward the small building at the corner of the garden that she had never noticed before. Large glass doors, and inside there was a figure moving. "That is Daddy's gym," Bella said, following her gaze. "Daddy practices punching there. Every morning. Daddy says it helps him stay calm." As though hypnotized, Olivia walked toward it, pulling Bella along. She did not know what she was doing, only that her feet kept moving automatically. When she got close enough, she looked through the glass and froze in place. Dante was punching a heavy bag. Not the Dante in the three-piece suit she had grown accustomed to. Not the cold Dante with his shirt buttoned all the way up. He wore only shorts and was barefoot, his upper body completely bare, and Olivia could not look away. Muscles rippled beneath sun-bronzed skin, flexing with each powerful and precise punch. Sweat glistened on his shoulders and chest, running down along the prominent veins. But it was not just the muscles. There were scars. So many scars. A long one running across his abdomen as though someone had tried to cut him open. Several small round marks on his chest that Olivia recognized as old bullet wounds. Crisscrossing marks on his back when he turned, as though he had once been tortured. This body was a map of violence and survival, of a life she could not imagine. Suddenly, Dante stopped. He turned his head toward the glass door, and their eyes met. Olivia wanted to turn away, wanted to pretend she had not seen anything, but she could not move. His dark eyes pinned her in place, and in that moment, the world around them disappeared. There was no Bella beside her, no garden, no glass wall between them, only him and her, and the air suddenly became so thick it was hard to breathe. Olivia's heart pounded in her chest, so hard she feared he could hear it despite the layer of glass between them. Her cheeks burned, and she knew she was blushing like a 16-year-old girl seeing her crush for the first time. But she was not 16 anymore. And this was not some harmless schoolgirl infatuation. This was Dante Moretti, the most dangerous man she had ever met. The man who had saved her life, held her captive, and now made her forget how to breathe with just one look. Dante said nothing. He just looked at her for one more second, then turned back to continue punching the bag as though nothing had happened. But Olivia saw that his next punch was harder, more violent, as though he were trying to hit something that was not the bag. "Miss Livy?" Bella's voice pulled her back to reality. "Why is your face so red?" "It is nothing," Olivia said quickly, turning away and pulling Bella toward the fountain. "Let us go throw coins. Come on." But the entire way there, she still felt Dante's gaze burning into her back, and her heart still refused to stop racing. That night, Olivia could not stay in her room. The four walls seemed to be closing in, and the image of Dante in the gym kept appearing in her mind every time she closed her eyes. The muscles, the sweat, the scars, and his eyes when he looked at her through the glass. She needed air. She needed to get out. She slipped out of her room around 11 at night, walked along the empty hallway, down the stairs, and out the back door leading to the garden. No one stopped her. Perhaps Marcus had grown accustomed to her wandering at night, or perhaps someone had given orders to allow her more freedom. She did not know and did not care. The garden at night held a beauty entirely different from the daytime. The full moon cast its light over the flower bushes like a layer of silver, and the fountain at the center sparkled under the gentle glow. The angel statue stood motionless, wings spread wide toward the sky, peaceful face as though praying for lost souls. Olivia sat down on the edge of the fountain, letting the sound of trickling water soothe her chaotic thoughts. She dipped her fingers into the cool water, watching the ripples spread and fade away, and wondered what she was doing here. Not in this garden, but in this life. 3 weeks ago, she had been a waitress with worn-out shoes. Now she was sitting in the mansion of one of the most powerful men in Chicago, with a bullet that had passed through her shoulder and a heart racing because of that man. "You will catch a cold." The voice came from behind, making Olivia jump and turn around. Dante was standing there, as though he were a part of the darkness that had just separated itself. He had changed clothes, wearing black trousers and a white shirt not fully buttoned, and in his hand was a jacket. Before Olivia could say anything, he had stepped forward and draped the jacket over her shoulders. His scent lingered faintly on the fabric, sandalwood and whiskey, warm and dangerously intoxicating. "Thank you," she whispered, not knowing what else to say. Dante did not respond. He sat down beside her, close enough for her to feel the warmth radiating from his body, but he did not touch her. They sat in silence for a long while, watching the angel statue bathed in moonlight. "You deserve to know the truth." Dante finally spoke, his voice deep and measured. "About who I am. About what you saved." Olivia turned to look at him, her heart beating faster. "I know you are dangerous. I know you are not an ordinary businessman. No. Dante looked straight into her eyes, not avoiding her gaze. I am the boss of one of the largest mafia families in Chicago, the Moretti family. We control most of the operations on the south side of the city. Drugs, casinos, loan sharking, and many other things you do not want to know about. He paused, watching her reaction. Olivia said nothing. She had guessed some of it, from the armed bodyguards, from the way everyone called him Mr. Moretti, from the fear in Tony's eyes that night. But hearing him admit it still made her shiver. The attackers at the restaurant that night, Dante continued. They were my uncle's men, Vincent Moretti. He wants to seize control of the family, and he thought the fastest way was to kill Bella. No heir, no future. I would fall apart, and he would step up. His voice turned cold, filled with hatred. He was also the one who killed Gianna. I just confirmed it. Olivia drew a sharp breath. Are you certain? Certain. A single word, but it contained 6 years of agony and vengeance, and I will make him pay. Drop by drop of blood, they fell into silence. The sound of water from the fountain suddenly seemed louder in the quiet night. Olivia thought about everything she had just heard. Mafia, murder, power wars. This was the world she had accidentally stepped into just because she wanted to save a 5-year-old girl. Why are you telling me this? She asked softly. Because you sacrificed your life for my daughter without knowing who we were. Dante turned to look at her, and in the moonlight, his eyes were no longer cold. They were burning. You deserve to know who you saved, and you deserve the choice of whether to stay or not. If I want to leave, I will let you go, he said. But there was something in his voice that told Olivia it would not be easy. Not for him. Not for her. And if I want to stay? The question slipped through her lips before she could stop it. Dante did not answer with words. He raised his hand, touching her face, his fingers tracing lightly across her cheek, as though she were something fragile that might shatter at any moment. And then he kissed her. The first kiss was so gentle that Olivia almost thought she was imagining it. Just lips touching. A silent question. A request for permission. She could have pulled back. She could have pushed him away. She could have chosen safety. But she did not. Instead, she leaned forward. And the kiss deepened. Dante's hand slid into her hair, pulling her closer. His lips were no longer gentle. They were hungry, desperate, as though he had been waiting for this moment for so long without knowing it. Olivia felt herself melting, all rational thought evaporating, leaving only his warmth, his scent, and the feeling of falling into an abyss without wanting to be saved. When they pulled apart, both were breathing hard. Their foreheads touched, and Dante looked straight into her eyes, his voice hoarse. This is very dangerous. Do you understand? Being with me means you will become a target. You will never have a normal life. I know, Olivia whispered. You should run, perhaps. But she did not run. She stayed there, in his arms, beside the fountain with the angel statue as witness, and let him kiss her again. Because sometimes, the most dangerous things are the very things that make us feel alive. They returned to the mansion when the moon had already set. Neither spoke another word. But Dante's hand held Olivia's tightly the entire way, as though he feared that if he let go, she would vanish like a dream. He walked her to her bedroom door, kissed her forehead for a long moment, then turned and left without looking back. Olivia lay in bed until dawn. Light filtered through the curtains, her fingers touching her lips, still feeling his warmth. She did not know what the future would hold. She only knew that last night, something had changed, and she could no longer go back to being the invisible waitress at Bellissimo restaurant. An urgent knock came at 7 a.m, pulling her from her fitful sleep. She opened the door and found Mrs. Elena standing there with a worried expression. Mr. Moretti wants to see you. In his office. Right now. Olivia quickly changed and followed the housekeeper through the familiar hallways, arriving at a heavy oak door she had never entered before. Inside, Dante stood behind a large desk, facing Marcus. Both were dressed in black, and the tension in the room was so thick, Olivia could feel it like a physical presence. When she stepped in, Dante looked up. His eyes no longer held the tender gaze from last night. They were cold, sharp, the eyes of a man preparing for war. Vincent is gathering his forces, Marcus said, his voice tight as a bowstring. Our sources report he will attack within the next 48 hours. Not here. He is targeting our business operations first, trying to weaken us from the outside. I have to go, Dante said to Olivia, his voice deep and resolute. There are matters that need to be handled in person. I do not know when I will return. Olivia felt as though someone had just poured ice water into her chest. Just last night they had kissed under the moonlight, and now he was talking about stepping into a war that could take his life. "How dangerous is it?" she asked, her voice trembling slightly despite her effort to stay calm. Dante did not answer. That was answer enough. He walked around the desk and stood before her. Marcus quietly left, closing the door behind him, leaving them alone. "I need you to do something," Dante said, raising his hand to touch her face. "Take care of Bella. Do not leave the mansion. Do not let her know what is happening. Will you come back?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Dante looked at her for a long moment, as though memorizing every line of her face. Then he leaned down and kissed her. This kiss was different from last night. It was not gentle or exploratory. It was desperate, fierce, as though this might be the last time, as though he was trying to pour everything he could not say into this one kiss. When he pulled away, Olivia felt her lips burning, and her eyes wet with tears. "Take care of my daughter," Dante said, his voice hoarse. "Always," she whispered. And he was gone. The next 3 days were the longest of Olivia's life. She tried to keep everything normal for Bella. They folded origami. They read books. They threw coins into the fountain and wished for things she dared not say aloud. The little girl asked where Daddy had gone, and Olivia said he was on a business trip, that he would be back soon, trying to keep her voice from shaking. At night, after Bella had fallen asleep, Olivia lay staring at the ceiling and prayed. She was not religious, but she prayed anyway. "Please let him come back. Please let him be safe. Please do not let this be the end when everything had just begun." The phone Dante had left for her received short messages each day. Day 1, safe. Will take longer than expected. Day 2, still safe. Kiss Bella for me. Day 3, almost done. Miss you. Miss you. 2 simple words that made Olivia cry in the bathroom so Bella would not hear. And during those days of waiting, as she cared for the curly-haired little girl, read stories to her, held her when she called for Daddy in her sleep, Olivia realized a truth she could not deny. She had fallen in love with them. Not just Dante with his burning kisses and eyes dark as night, but Bella too with her clear laughter and swinging braided pigtails. She loved this small, broken, dangerous family, and she would do anything to protect them. On the 3rd night, Olivia sang Bella to sleep and returned to her own room, exhausted but unable to close her eyes. She stood by the window looking out at the dark garden, and a feeling of unease suddenly rose in her chest. Something was wrong. The air was too quiet, too still. Then she heard the first sound, and the world shattered once again. The first sound was glass breaking. Olivia froze by the window, every sense suddenly sharpened to painful clarity. It was not the sound of someone accidentally dropping a cup. It was the sound of a window being smashed, an intentional sound, the sound of intrusion. Then came gunshots with silencers, 2 in quick succession, brief and deadly, the thud of a body hitting the floor, running footsteps, someone shouting in Italian, then going silent mid-sentence. "No, no, no." Olivia did not let herself think. She bolted from her room, bare feet on the cold wooden floor, heart pounding wildly in her chest. The hallway was pitch black, the lights had been cut, and she had to use her hands to feel along the wall to find her way. Bella's room was at the end of the hall on the right, 30 steps. She had counted during her days here. 30 steps and she would reach the little girl. Heavy footsteps echoed from the staircase. Multiple people, coming up. Olivia ran faster, no longer caring about staying quiet. 20 steps, 15, 10. She pushed open Bella's door and rushed inside. The little girl was already awake, sitting up in bed with eyes wide with fear in the darkness. "Miss Livy? What is happening? Why are there strange noises?" Olivia did not answer. She ran to the bed, scooped Bella up and looked around the room. The window? 2nd floor. No fire escape. The bathroom door? Only one way out. The wardrobe, the large cabinet in the corner of the room with thick wooden doors. She carried Bella over, opened the wardrobe door and climbed inside, pulling the little girl into her lap, then closed the door behind them. Complete darkness enveloped them. Bella's clothes were soft and smelled of fabric softener, but Olivia could feel nothing except the fear choking her throat. She covered Bella's mouth with her hand, feeling the little girl trembling in her arms. "Shh," she whispered into the child's ear. "Be quiet, okay? Like playing hide and seek. We have to be quiet. Do you understand?" Bella nodded, and Olivia felt the little girl's tears soaking through her hand. The bedroom door burst open and slammed against the wall. Footsteps entering. the voice of an unfamiliar man. "Search. The kid has to be here somewhere." A flashlight beam swept across the room, slipping through the crack of the wardrobe door in thin slivers of light like knife blades. Olivia held Bella tighter, trying not to breathe, not to move, not to exist. Maybe they would not look in the wardrobe. Maybe they would think the little girl was hiding somewhere else. Maybe. The wardrobe door flew open. The flashlight shone directly into Olivia's face, making her squeeze her eyes shut from the glare. A rough hand grabbed her arm and yanked her out, Bella still in her arms screaming in terror. "Found them!" The voice was full of triumph. "And there is a bonus, too." Olivia was dragged to the middle of the room, her eyes gradually adjusting to the darkness until she could see them. 4 men in black, faces covered with masks, guns in their hands. And standing among them was an older man, unmasked, silver hair slicked back, eyes cold as stone. She had never met him, but she knew immediately who he was. Vincent Moretti, Dante's uncle, the one who had killed Gianna, the one who had sent the attackers to the restaurant that night. "So this is the girl my nephew has been hiding in his house," Vincent said, his voice carrying a distinctive Italian accent but cold enough to freeze blood. "The girl who took a bullet for this child." He stepped closer, and Olivia backed away, clutching the sobbing Bella tightly in her arms. "Do not touch her," Olivia said, her voice shaking but trying to hold firm. "Do not touch Bella." Vincent laughed, a cold and hollow sound. "You think you are in a position to give orders? You are just a pawn, girl. A pawn that Dante made the mistake of caring about." He signaled, and one of the gunmen stepped forward and ripped Bella from Olivia's arms. The little girl screamed, reaching back toward Olivia, and Olivia lunged forward to get her back. A punch to her stomach sent her crumpling to the floor, gasping for air. "Miss Livy!" Bella screamed. "Let me go! I want Miss Livy." Vincent looked down at Olivia with contempt in his eyes. "Dante thinks he can defeat me, thinks he can protect everything he loves while running around destroying my people. He was wrong." He bent down and grabbed Olivia's chin, forcing her to look up. "Let us see how he feels when he loses everything. His wife is dead, his daughter will die. And you, his new lover, you will die too. Slowly, painfully. And I will send him the video to watch." Olivia spat in his face. It was an instinctive reaction, no thought behind it, and she knew it would make everything worse. But she did not care. She would not let him see her fear. Vincent wiped his face, his eyes blazing with cruelty. "Very well, we will start with you first. Let the child watch. Let her know what happens to those who stand in the way of the Moretti family." He stood and gave his orders. "Take them both downstairs. Set up the camera. I want Dante to see every second." Olivia was pulled to her feet, her hands tied behind her back. Bella was carried away by another man, still crying and calling her name. They were pushed into the hallway, and Olivia tried to remember how many men there were, where their weapons were, anything that might help them escape. But she knew it was hopeless. She was not a superhero. She was just a waitress with worn-out shoes. They had just reached the top of the stairs when gunfire erupted. Not the silenced shots from before. This gunfire was loud, clear, and it came from downstairs. Then a voice rang out, a voice Olivia would recognize anywhere. "Vincent!" Dante had returned. Everything happened in an instant. Vincent whipped around, his eyes flashing with panic before quickly being replaced by cold calculation. He barked orders in Italian, and the man holding Bella immediately handed the little girl to him, then drew his gun and aimed it toward the stairs. 2 others took position, while the 4th still held Olivia tight, the gun barrel pressed against her temple. Dante appeared at the bottom of the stairs like a ghost of vengeance. His black shirt was stained with blood, whose she did not know, his face cold as ice, and his eyes burning with the fires of hell. Marcus stood right behind him, gun in hand, and from the sounds echoing from other parts of the house, Olivia knew they had not come alone. But none of that mattered, because Vincent was holding Bella against his chest like a human shield, the gun barrel pressed to the little girl's temple, and the smile on his lips was so cruel it made her skin crawl. "Stop right there, nephew," Vincent said, his voice echoing through the hallway. "One more step, and the child dies." Dante froze. The gun in his hand was still raised, but he could not shoot. Not when Bella was in the middle, crying and calling for her father, trembling in the hands of the enemy. This was a standoff that no one could break. A Mexican standoff. The man holding Olivia tightened his grip, and she felt the cold gun barrel pressing deeper into her skin. "Put the gun down, Dante," Vincent continued, his voice full of triumph. "Put it down and let me leave. Otherwise, your daughter will die right before your eyes, just like her mother." Something dangerous flashed in Dante's eyes. So you admit it. Admit what? That I killed Gianna? Vincent laughed coldly. Of course I killed her. She was your weakness. She made you soft. Made you forget who you are, where you belong. The Moretti family does not need a leader controlled by love. He spat on the floor. She found out I was running my own operations. Was going to tell you. I had to eliminate her. And I will do the same to this child if you do not cooperate. Bella sobbed uncontrollably, her heartbreaking cries echoing through the tense space. Olivia looked at the little girl, at the face streaming with tears, the brown eyes wide with terror, and she felt something ignite in her chest. It was not fear. It was rage, determination. She had saved this little girl once. She would do it again. Put the gun down, Vincent screamed, losing patience. Now! Dante looked at Olivia. Their eyes met for just a fraction of a second, and she saw the desperation in his gaze, the helplessness of a man being forced to choose between two impossible choices. She nodded slightly, a gesture so small almost no one would notice. But Dante noticed, and he understood. The guard holding her was distracted, his gaze shifting momentarily toward Vincent and Dante as the tension peaked. Olivia gathered every ounce of strength she had and kicked hard at the shin of the man holding her. He cried out in pain and loosened his grip for just an instant. Just an instant was all she needed. She broke free and lunged toward Vincent with everything she had. Not to attack him. She knew she could not win. She just needed to reach Bella. He would shoot her. She knew that. But when he shot her, he would have to move the gun away from Bella's head. And that was all Dante needed. She crashed into Vincent, her hands grabbing Bella and ripping the little girl from his arms, twisting her body to shield the child with her own. The gunshot rang out. Pain tore through her left shoulder, searing through the flesh just inches from where the first bullet had hit 3 weeks ago. This time it hurt more. Perhaps because the old wound had not fully healed. Perhaps because she knew what she was doing. She fell, clutching Bella tight in her arms, shielding the little girl from whatever might happen next. Then other gunshots rang out. Not one, many. Screaming, bodies hitting the floor. Dante roaring with fury. Olivia could not see anything. Her eyes were squeezed shut, her body covering Bella, and she only prayed that no matter what happened, the little girl would be safe. Then silence. A terrifying silence after the storm of gunfire. A hand touched her shoulder, gentle, trembling. Olivia. Dante's voice was hoarse, nearly breaking. Olivia, look at me, please. She opened her eyes. Dante was kneeling beside her, his face pale as paper, eyes red and raw. Behind him, Vincent lay motionless on the floor, a bullet hole in the center of his forehead, eyes staring blankly at the ceiling, seeing nothing anymore. The 3 other gunmen also lay scattered, and Marcus stood there with his gun still smoking. Bella, Olivia whispered, her voice weak. The little girl. I am okay, Bella cried, still curled in her arms. Miss Livy saved me. Miss Livy. Do not talk anymore, Dante commanded, but his voice was trembling. He tore his own shirt and pressed it against her shoulder to stop the bleeding, and Olivia saw that his hands were shaking. Call Dr. Cole. Now, he shouted toward Marcus. Olivia wanted to tell him she was fine, that she had been through this before, that the bullet last time had gone through the same spot and she had survived, but the pain was too strong, and darkness was closing in. The last thing she felt before losing consciousness was Dante's lips touching her forehead, and his voice whispering in her ear like a desperate prayer. Do not leave me. Please, do not leave me. A week passed like a hazy dream. Olivia woke in the familiar room with the high ceiling and crystal chandelier, her left shoulder carefully bandaged, and Dr. Cole standing beside the bed with a relieved smile. You really must stop making your left shoulder a target, he said, his voice tinged with humor. The bullet grazed the healing tissue of your previous wound. It tore open the stitches and caused significant blood loss, but miraculously missed the bone again. You could say you now have 2 scars right next to each other. Dante did not leave her room for the first 3 days. He sat in the armchair beside her bed, eyes red from lack of sleep, stubble on his jaw from not shaving, but refusing to go anywhere despite Mrs. Elena and Marcus taking turns trying to persuade him. He only left when Bella needed him, and even then, the little girl was often carried to Olivia's room to watch over Miss Livy alongside her father. Bella refused to leave her side. The little girl climbed onto the bed and lay next to Olivia, careful not to touch her injured shoulder, and told her all sorts of stories in a whisper, as though afraid speaking louder would cause her more pain. She brought the paper crane they had folded together, placed it on the nightstand like a protective charm, and refused to let anyone take it away. On the 4th day, Olivia could sit up. On the 5th day, she could walk around the room. On the 6th day, she made it to the hallway and no one stopped her. Marcus only nodded in greeting as she passed, a gesture of respect she had never received from him before. Everything had changed. Vincent was dead. The main threat had been eliminated. Those who had sided with him had been destroyed or surrendered, and the Moretti family was once again unified under Dante's leadership. She was no longer a prisoner or a guest. She was the woman who had twice saved the life of the boss's daughter, and that carried a weight no one in this house could ignore. On the 7th night, Olivia went out to the garden alone. The fountain sparkled under the moonlight, the angel statue still standing there with wings spread wide, having witnessed everything that happened without saying a word. She sat on the edge of the fountain, where she and Dante had kissed for the first time, and let the sound of trickling water soothe her soul. Footsteps sounded behind her, and she did not need to turn around to know who it was. "You should not be out here alone," Dante said, but his voice held no reproach. He sat down beside her, close enough for their shoulders to touch. For a long while, neither spoke. They just sat there, watching the moonlight dance on the water, and savoring the rare peace after the storm. "I need to ask you something," Dante finally spoke. She turned to look at him and was surprised to see nervousness on that always cold face. Dante Moretti, the mafia boss who made all of Chicago tremble, looked like a schoolboy about to ask a girl in his class on a date. "You can leave if you want," he said, his voice dropping low. "The threat is over. I have taken care of all of your mother's medical expenses. Her surgery has been scheduled for next month with the best doctor in Chicago. You will never have to worry about money again." He paused, drawing a breath as though preparing for something difficult. "But I do not want you to go." Olivia stayed silent, her heart beating faster. "I am asking you to stay." Dante turned to look straight into her eyes, not kneeling, not standing above her but sitting as equals, not as a guest, not as someone under protection, but as part of this family, as part of my life. "What are you saying?" Olivia's voice trembled slightly despite her effort to stay calm. "I am saying that you conquered my daughter's heart long ago. Bella asks about you every day, includes you in every plan she makes, and you have conquered my heart too. Though I have fought against it every step of the way." His hand rose to touch her face, his thumb tracing along her cheekbone. "I lived for 5 years like a machine. No emotion, no hope, only Bella and revenge. Then you crashed into my life, with your worn-out shoes and brave heart, and for the first time since Gianna died, I wanted something more. I want you." Olivia's heart caught in her throat. "I have conditions," she said, her voice calmer than she felt. "Tell me." "My mother. I want to see her regularly. No restrictions. No bodyguards hovering close." "One bodyguard," Dante replied immediately. "At a distance. You are still a potential target and I cannot take risks." Olivia nodded in acceptance. "I want to know the truth. No more business secrets I am not allowed to ask about. If I stay, I need to understand this world. There are things I cannot tell you for your own legal safety, but within reasonable limits. I will be honest with you, and Bella." Olivia drew a breath. "If I stay, I am not just the woman living in this house. I want to be a real part of her life, to care for her, to make decisions with you, to be there for her." Dante's eyes softened. "You are already all of those things. Bella loves you. She calls you Miss Livy. But I know in her heart, you are so much more than that." He took her hand. "I am proposing to you, Olivia. Not right now, but when you are ready, when you are certain you can live with who I am and what I do. I will court you properly, dinners, flowers, conversations until dawn, and when you are ready, I will marry you." Olivia looked at him. This man who had turned her life upside down, the most dangerous person she had ever met, but also the one who had cried when she was wounded, who had not slept for 3 nights watching over her, who looked at her as though she were his entire world. "This is insane," she whispered. "Completely insane," he agreed. "So say yes." Tears streamed down her face, but she was smiling. "Yes," she said, her voice trembling but certain. "Dear God, yes." 6 months later, Olivia stood in the garden, where she had once thrown coins and made wishes, wearing a pristine white wedding dress she never thought she would ever wear. The fountain with the angel statue still stood there, having witnessed her journey from a wounded waitress to the woman about to become Mrs. Moretti. The gentle afternoon sunlight of a Chicago autumn felt like a blessing from heaven. This was not the extravagant wedding with hundreds of guests that she had once imagined wealthy people having. Only the closest loved ones were there, legitimate members of the Moretti family who had no ties to the darkness. Mrs. Elena, wiping away tears of joy, Dr. Cole, who had saved her life twice, and Marcus standing at attention like a soldier guarding the happiness of his employer's family, and her mother. Susan Parker sat in the front row, her face radiant and healthy after her successful heart surgery 3 months earlier. She had cried when Olivia told her about Dante, worried that her daughter was making the biggest mistake of her life. But then she met him, saw the way he looked at Olivia, saw how Bella climbed into her daughter's lap without hesitation, and she understood. Her daughter had found something she never expected: a family, a place to belong, a man willing to burn the world for those he loved. Bella was the flower girl, of course. The little girl refused to wear a traditional white dress, insisting on a sparkling purple one because, according to her, white was boring and love should be radiant. She walked solemnly across the grass carpet, scattering flower petals with absolute concentration, as though this were the most important mission of her life. Dante stood waiting for her beneath an arch of white roses, and when their eyes met, Olivia saw his glistening with tears. The man who had not cried in 5 years, the cold man who made all of Chicago tremble, was fighting back tears as he watched her walk toward him. He took her hand, his scarred fingers intertwining with hers, and made his vows before all the people they loved. When Dante slid the ring onto her finger, a simple band with a diamond that was not too large because he knew she did not like extravagance, Olivia felt her eyes sting with emotion. Then came the wedding kiss, gentle and sweet, a promise rather than a question. Bella broke the sacred moment with her clear voice full of excitement. "Now Miss Livy is my mommy forever." The entire garden burst into laughter. Dante lifted his daughter up, and Olivia embraced them both. Her little family, the family she never thought she would have. Her mother stood and walked over to wrap Olivia in her arms, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I am so proud of you," she whispered. "Your father would be proud too." That night, after the guests had gone, after Bella had fallen fast asleep in her room with her new teddy bear, Olivia stood by the window looking out at the garden where she had just become Dante Moretti's wife. He came up behind her, wrapped his arms around her waist, and rested his chin on her shoulder. "Happy?" he asked softly. "Happier than words can describe," she whispered, and she truly meant it. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, the waitress with worn-out shoes who had to stuff cardboard inside to cover the holes, the girl working 2 jobs to save every penny for her mother's surgery, the invisible girl, forgotten, just part of the scenery in the world of the wealthy. That girl had died on the night she threw herself into the line of fire to save a child she did not know. And from the ashes of that girl, a new woman had risen, stronger, braver, more loved than anything she had ever dared to dream. The worn-out shoes had been replaced by elegant Italian leather ones, but Olivia still kept the old pair in her closet as a reminder of who she once was and the journey she had traveled. Because sometimes the most beautiful stories begin in the darkest moments. Sometimes you have to bleed to discover what you are made of. And sometimes, just sometimes, saving someone else's life means finding your own. The story of Olivia and Dante has come to an end, but the lessons it carries will last forever. This is a story about courage, about how decisions made in a split second can change an entire life, about love that knows no boundaries between rich and poor, about unconditional sacrifice, and above all, about never underestimating yourself, because within each of us there is a hero waiting to be awakened. If this story has touched your heart, please take just a moment to hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications so you never miss these emotional stories each day. A like and share from you will help meaningful stories like this reach even more people. How did this story make you feel? Do you believe that in real life, love can truly overcome all obstacles? Have you ever done something brave that even surprised yourself? Share your thoughts and feelings in the comments below. We always want to hear the voices from deep within your hearts, because those very thoughts are what inspire us to continue bringing you stories that touch your soul every day. Wishing all of you watching this video the very best of health, a life filled with joy, peace, and happiness each and every day. Thank you for staying with us through this long journey. Goodbye for now, and we will see you again in the next video.